Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you might be. I am Nicole BC, and you know everything. Yeah, in terms of introductions, Scott, some of the people that, pretty much everybody I know is a friend or is someone that I want to both know and make a friend. but we're dear friends.
Yeah.
And I was wondering how you'd want to be introduced in your bio, but I think, you're keeping the local icon thing under wraps. So artist, photographer, writer, musician, sound engineer, dad, dude, like, a combination of all the things. I have 1,000 questions I'm going to ask you. I'm actually going to grill you. So
Okay.
buckle up, Buttercup,
All
because
right.
I have some questions I always like to explore with people, but I think not just your background, but how all of these different facets in your creative life have intersected in the last couple of years. And you find yourself gainfully employed.
I do.
And I don't want to say it's a dream job, but it is certainly a culmination of a lot of your talents, which also, who does that? Who can do all of those things? So yeah, I have lots that I want to talk about. But first, I like to ask people about their origin story. And I'll let you choose. You can talk about why you think we're having this conversation today, or how you just kind of got to where you're at in general, the kind of, origin story of Mr. Scott McCormick.
ADHD, I think.
Superpowers, your latent mutant superpower. Okay, go on.
Yeah. I feel like that's what brought me here. It's the HD part of it, really, that I can't slow down. I don't know. I remember, I started piano when I was young, real young. I would come home and I would go until 4 a.m, and I remember I was picking up bar gigs. I'd been playing for a couple of years. I think I was 13, 12 or 13. And I started picking up a bar gig that had an extended liquor license, but I would show up on Tuesday nights. They had an open blues jam. And there was this guy, Reggie, he used to play the piano pretty well. And so I would kind of sit behind him and I would watch him play. And I'd say hey, in between songs, I'd say hey, how'd you do that? And he'd go, oh man, you like that? Check this out. And then he'd play it. And wow, that's cool. How'd you do that? And he'd go, oh shit, you like that? Check this out. So I realized I was never going to get anything directly from Reggie. He was just going to show off, and so but I would pay extra close attention, and then I would go home and I would spend the next 2.5 hours before I had to go to school, on the piano, figuring out what Reggie had played. I started figuring stuff out, and I couldn't stop, and even in college, I wouldn't go to class. I would just, I don't know. My teachers were supportive, I suppose. It was I would skip class all the time and I would just lock myself in piano rooms. And I remember in college, there was a 3-day stint. I didn't sleep. I was kind of just going to the vending machine and smoking cigarettes in between, and I was playing. At one point, I hit a big chord on this grand piano and one of the strings broke. And you don't break piano strings, and I also realized that I've been the only one in here for 3 days. I've been pounding on this thing. I broke that string. And I remember taking the cover and just kind of gently putting it down. And,
Reggie?
Yeah, Reggie, check this out. But yeah, I put the cover down and I was I think I should go to bed, So I finally stopped. But, what brought me here is that I don't stop. I never have, even as a little kid. And now I even just right before this phone call, I was going, and right after this phone call, I'll be going. And the big question isn't what brought me here. I think the big question is, how can I do the work to learn how to rest? Because that's what I'm struggling with right now, is trying to figure out not how to keep going, but rather how to comfortably stop going. And so I think, it's partially a joke, but it's partially true. I think ADHD brought me here. Oftentimes, especially in all the realms that I've been in, I prefer to put my hands on stuff because when you put your hands on something, you can see the progress of it and you can see it be done. It's like, cool. I saw that happen and now I'm done with it, rather than just like some anamorphous idea, like art or something. Each piece of mine, and this has to do with music too, each piece of mine has a completion point, so I put my hands on it. It's why I don't just do a big piece of art and call it a day. It's like everything has these progressions, these milestones where it's like, yeah, that's done. I put my hands on that part. Now I get to move over to this part. I think it switches between like serendipitous ideology or ideation and logical ideation, and so it's like all the time there's kind of this toss between the two, kind of this idea of, well, now I'm creating and now it's, all serendipitous, but then there's logical, which is, well, now what part of this do I get to clean and do I get to play and fix and, anyway.
No, that's brilliant. We're going to hop around a lot, and you just beautifully segued into one of the questions that I wanted to ask you because you are such a multifaceted artist. I don't know. Yeah. I feel like you're in a like artist wank phase right now, but in a couple hours that'll change.
Sure.
But you have a dark room in your basement. You have images in a gallery. You have a job, and you have a CEO that you report to. Like you have a kid. You have a house. Like you have all of these different things that you're working on. To your point, some of them it's serendipitous ideation, and others it is logical ideation. How do you? Because I had an probably an earlier career stage artist ask me, when do I know it's time to let something go, a particular piece, a particular phase, maybe even a modality, and move into the other thing that's like demanding my attention right now or really asking for my attention right now? Like, how do you kind of navigate between all of these different creative channels in your life? And when do you know it's either time to move on or I get to move on?
I love that. So Tom Waits, I heard an interview with Tom Waits some time ago, and I think he was talking about his artistic process and how he kind of starts. And I think he was saying something along the lines of like, ideas are like flitting around in the air and they might fly into your ear. And our fear is that we have to trap it and use it right now, lest it leave the other ear and go find someone else. And he said, it's not about being able to trap it. It's about being able to acknowledge it and then grab it by the shirt collar and say, can't you tell I'm in traffic right now? I'll deal with you later, And,
can't you tell I'm in traffic right now?
Yeah, can't you tell I'm in traffic right now? Yeah. And so, but, I don't think that there is any truer test to that idea than having a child. Because early on, when you have a baby, how do I say this? Okay. So what I always took from that is it's the notion of recall. You don't have to trap the idea, but you have to acknowledge it. And you can recognize the melody later. You can recognize the concept later. You can recognize all of those things. But what happens is, you enter a flow state, with anything. I mean, that's your goal, right? Is to get into a flow state, and you're going with any kind of creation. But if you have a baby, it sucks to your flow state. Who the fuck cares? You got to get up and like take care of your baby, She's going to start crying whenever she wants, about whatever she wants. And so it's like, well, that's such a trial, because then you leave for 45 minutes or however long, and then you come back. And so how quick can you get yourself to a flow state right away? And I think that's a practice that took me years, is how fast can I get to a flow state? And now I recognize I can get certain projects to a point where I know that as soon as I sit down, I can enter that state. So I do a lot of pre-work on things. And so like if there's a lull, even a creative lull, I start to prepare everything that's coming, and get that to a point where when I'm ready, I can sit down and just go, and I'm off and I'm there and I'm ready, because it's not asking the universe permission to enter a state. It's more just getting yourself prepared. And when you have 50 ideas that you're excited about, you just get it to the point where it's like, well, as soon as I sit down and hit play, I'm excited and I'm on and I'm going. And so at any given time in my life, I have layers of things that I would love to do, and they're all prepared and ready for me to sit down in a flow state. I think it's some of the most anxious work I do is in the beginning, just to prepare it, because that's the hard part of like, yeah, this is like the technician that has to sit down, not the creative. This is the one that has to sit down and get this ready for the creative to step in and play. So that's almost more difficult. And what I've found for me is I do that while I'm creating. So if I have something open in Photoshop and I need to do something in After Effects, I'll have After Effects open. And instead of standing up and going and having a cigarette or grabbing a drink or something, I'll spend 5 minutes just doing the technician work and saying, this is really boring, but whatever, it's boring. It's 5 minutes. Let me just do it. Let me just put my hands on it and get it prepared for when it's not boring. And so at any given time, I have layers of things that I'm extremely excited about. And I'll tell you, when it's done, it's just when that runs out, when you realize, and I don't know if anything's ever done. Let me say that. I think when you're done working on it, you start to recognize after all these years, you start to recognize like, now I'm just going to start overworking it. There's a line that's easy to cross, and it's like, well, that feels good. Does it feel like 100% what I want? Probably not. But does it feel like that's a really good place to leave it? And if I can't stop fixating on it, that obsessive quality, if I can't stop fixating on it, I'm not done with it, But the moment, just the same as acknowledging a flow state moment to get you there, I equally try to acknowledge the flow state moment of when it's dead and say like, you know what? I'm going to walk, even if that means for a day or 2 days or a week or a month. I have some projects that are halfway done and I'm still in a flow state with them at all times. But it's like, I haven't figured out how to reapproach sitting down with some of those yet. Because I walked and I was like, I need to cut this right now because I'm not present with it. I'm not giving it that attention that it deserves. And then if you have a deadline, a lot of artists say that helps. I don't really care. It's like, I don't know, the deadline just tells me you're done. Okay, great. Like, cool. Then I guess my flow state will end at noon on Monday or whatever, end of day Tuesday or something, like whatever. But it's like, I don't know if there is a done. I think there's just an element of maybe I'm done. Maybe the world around and that little idea has been squished, and I don't want to kill it. I don't want to kill that idea. I want it to grow and continue. Because I mean, like, even you put a piece in a gallery and you see people's reactions, and there's a massive part of it that's like, gosh, I kind of wish I would have cleaned that. I kind of wish I would have done this. And, but it's like, but approaching anything with that kind of mindset, that becomes difficult, because now you're thinking about the past instead of thinking about the potential of what could be, fixating on things that were. I don't find much value in that per se. I think that there are celebrations and there's always phenomenal stories, but I don't, outside of that, the regret of any of that never seems to land with me. I remember I was working on this wooden wall a long time ago in my old studio, and I was watching a video about like, how the hell do you do a wood wall? And so and I remember at the beginning of the video, the guy says like, look, like if you're doing this, you're doing this on a Saturday when everyone else is watching Netflix or relaxing or like out at the park or something. You've opted to put your hands on this and make this a reality. He said, so when you back out and you look at it, don't pick apart the little things. Don't think about like, oh, look, that's like a little bit off. And he said, and God forbid, don't tell anybody else looking at the wall. Don't say, yeah, I kind of wish I would have fixed that. I kind of wish. And he's like, what? They don't know. They don't need to know. And just the same, celebrate the fact that you're here doing this today because you don't have to be. This is something you're doing for you. Celebrate that. Enjoy that. And then sucks to whatever didn't work, who cares? You did something today that no one else did. And that's beautiful. I like that a lot. Yeah.
Prophetic advice from a YouTube video.
Yeah. That guy was, I don't know. He had kind of a Jesus vibe about him, but I liked it. Yeah.
Well, is attracted to like. It's funny. You're like laying up all of these perfect segues to questions I both typically ask and want to ask you. So thank you. And you were very specifically like, don't tell me what we're going to talk about. I was like, okay. But we're communing on another level.
Well, that's
You've kind of gotten into this, but something I like to ask my people who define themselves as creatives and artists. I think we're all artists, but I don't think everyone leads with that. And those that do, I would like to ask, what is your creative process? You talked about like, you can just sit down and go. And I think a lot of people would like to know, well, how do I get there? How did you get there? Or how do you get there?
Mine's a little different. By the way, nice nod to Rick Rubin on that intro. That's really good. That was really nice.
Well, this is another nod to Rick Rubin. When I heard him drink tea loudly for like an hour and a half on his podcast, I was like, if Rick Rubin can do it, I can fucking do it. Cause I don't know. I like consuming liquids.
Yeah. Well, tea you're supposed to sip, I mean, that's how you get the full flavor.
Yeah, but you're also not supposed to, you're not supposed to, air quotes, drink liquids into a microphone on a podcast. But I was just like, whatever, there are no rules. So.
Well, let's test the limits. Maybe on this podcast, we'll just sit here for 2.5 minutes of complete silence,
Just contemplating what chakra RT is. Well, this is coffee, but
I love that. My process I don't know, it might be a little different than others. I think my process is just, there's so many things flitting around. It's just picking which one seems kind of interesting at that time. Or at least maybe sussing out what has the most legs, or like, like
what deadline that is, that when does this project need to be done?
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, maybe once done and it's like, oh, I don't know, I'll do that, I guess. But, I think photography and anything like that, I tend to look more, there's what is that book? Oh, The Zen of Seeing. What a phenomenal read. But I think about that often, where it's like, if you look at a light pole, it's not looking at you and saying, look at that hairy guy. And so you don't get to do the same to that light pole. You don't get to tell it it's a light pole. But what you get to do as a creative is you get to acknowledge the form, the contrast, the color, the kind of root foundation of, of any kind of technical aspect regarding art. You can look at that grain, anything. And from there, when you cease to finish your story before you even start it, now you open yourself up to possibilities of how it may have gotten there. So the simple thing of, I don't know, maybe someone flew over in a helicopter and threw it like a javelin, or, maybe a giant used it as a toothpick, or, maybe it sprouted from the ground itself. I don't know, but once you rid yourself of starting with a story you already know, you open yourself up to the possibility of the story that could be. I genuinely do view that as the art of seeing. I think entering things, we always say like enter things with like a curious mind, or like, enter it like a kid does or whatever. And it's like, that's cool. But again, you're starting to kind of put a story onto something that doesn't need a story. Maybe just acknowledging what is a wonderful start. And I've been lucky enough now to be in kind of the music world and the art world and kind of all of that. And so constant practice of hearing and seeing has, I don't know, it's gotten me to a point where if I feel like maybe I don't have any ideas, tell me a sentence, and we're off and running, it's like within that sentence, there's so much possibility, if you think about a person, if you think about, a theology, if you think of anything that exists in the world, everything is connected. And through that, you can find this joyous abundance of concept. And yeah, so I don't know if I come up with ideas so much as just kind of allow the world to be intriguing, and allow the world to express itself. Often, this is a cool thing because, like I said, sometimes it's just telling the ideas not to show up. For the past few months, I've been, like I'll go on my walk or two with my dog every day, and there's a park near here and I love it. And I've been setting this kind of intention of like, walk until you don't think about walking anymore, until you don't think about the thing that you've walked away from or the thing that you're walking into. Walk until you notice your walk. And when you notice that, that's when I tell my watch to start tracking my steps. That's when I acknowledge the fact that now I'm on a walk, because the constant connection to what's waiting either in the future or behind on something as beautiful and as potentially intentional as a walk, where you start to recognize the interplay between kids and geese and, and ice cracking and, I don't know, I'm thinking about that very specific walk, I guess. But yeah, it's like, it's wonderful. You see the human connection. You see, you can see so much. You see the wind in a way.
So I, again, did not prep you. So I have no idea how you're going to feel about this question, but I think a lot of the listeners would be really curious. You at one point, well, so let me preface this. I have a really bad habit of asking 18-part questions, and I continue to say that with the hopes that I will curb that habit. It's not exactly working. You and I met when you were, for all intents and purposes, a full-time artist, and I was essentially your coach. And that was a moment in your life. You had previously had a creative agency. So I don't have any experience with this version of Scott. I've just heard of this version of Scott. I think a lot of people assume, oh, I'm a multifaceted artist, or I'm really good at one thing, and therefore I need to participate with other creatives to create this business structure, aka an agency. I think, again, the listener is curious, like, how does that happen? And I would like for you to share with them some key takeaways in terms of, like, if you are tempted to do this, this is what works and this is what doesn't work in your experience.
In terms of starting an agency, you mean?
Well, just the motivations behind it and what will make it successful, kind of in the same regards of like, oh, I had my train of thought here to create the parallels, but when is an idea something worth indulging in? And then when is that idea played out?
I see. Boy, there's so many potentials to this. This one might be a little long.
Go for it.
Okay. So from my world, again, connection, I think, is everywhere. And through that, I've discovered that through my entire life. And because of it, it's allowed me the joy of being able to explore so many different avenues, even marketing, branding and, whatever. So there's a business side and there's an art side. And I don't think that they're super separate. I think they just are. But, so you have these kind of like, well, yeah, I'll do video. Hey, I'll try some photography. Hey, I'll do your graphic design. Hey, I'll, write you a jingle for your commercial, whatever, like the problem with something like that is there's a lot of people like that who aren't very good. And so what happens with something like that is you run into this inevitable problem of people don't trust that you can do those things. They say, well, you got to pick one. Like, what's your one that you're really good at? Because it seems completely insane that maybe somebody would be doing 15 things well. Whereas I look at it and say, like, it's not bad or good per se. They're all the same thing. I mean, these are all just massive expressions. It just doesn't matter the tool. But the world doesn't tend to comprehend that. And so I was running into this issue of, it was particularly difficult for me to sell myself. People would see my work, and more often than not, they thought it was a compilation of other people's work that I was like just displaying, like I was like, check out someone else's photos and look at this wonderful logo that someone else did. No one ever realized like, that's all like I did all that, like that's not a concept, and so the need for an agency for me stemmed from that. And at that time, there's two directions we can go. I think, maybe we'll revisit this later, but like the Mayans believe that like, time is like a ripple. And so, it's always repeating itself. And the closer it is, you can almost tell the future, like if your dad came to visit, you'd know what to put in your refrigerator because tradition of time has dictated what he likes to eat or drink. That's you telling the future in a variation. But as those ripples get farther from the source, they become a little more obtuse. The Mayans, I think, even took in, what's his face? What's that guy? I always want to call him Nosferatu, but what's his name? Nostradamus. They took in Nostradamus and taught him the ways of, like time telling and all of this, and so it's all kind of based simply on that idea of the ripple of time, However, more for what I'm talking about, I also recognize that time can continually be a pendulum. And so in order to look at trajectory and trend and be able to tell what's coming, it's a constant recognition of, well, what set what you want to work on in motion, and then which way did that go? And so if there's, say, a massive global event, that we just went through and are arguably still going through, well, that triggered a lot of pendulums. And anybody who did okay for COVID, like musicians, because remember in the beginning, they were like, oh my God, you're so fucked, here's some money, or therapists or, art galleries or anywhere that felt like a safe space to be in an unsafe world is now feeling the residual of that pendulum, which is, well, now you get to pay the pauper, you benefited from it. Whether or not you did anything with that, that's up to you. But your life got to benefit from that. So when I was looking at an agency, I was looking a lot at that pendulum, and I was recognizing at that time, this was years ago, because now it's absolutely true. But back before that thought was a thought, I was recognizing agencies were large and clunky, and they took a long time to steer the ship. And what we needed was a quick, agile agency that could glom onto a concept and pivot at any time easily. And so through that, I found several other people who were similar to me in that, like, okay, the guy that was our copy guy, Justin, who was incredible at writing copy, also knew a bunch about graphic design and also dipped his toes a little bit in kind of web development. And then our UX guy, was incredible at that, but he killed it at web development and knew a little bit about video, and our photo guy, I wasn't the photo guy, like our photo guy, like killed it at video as well. And like knew a little bit about UX. So like everybody had kind of this overlap where purposely there was 5 of us, and very purposely we could change, and no one would be confused by that change. And because it was quick, and because everyone kind of understood enough about one another and what we all did, people could help and pick up and say like, what do you need on that video? Yeah, toss it over my way. I can do it. Boom, 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 boom. And so everything about it was built for speed, where you get 5 intensely creative people in a room. That's why it failed. but the entire intent of it was was speed, and it didn't fail because of creative. Honestly, it felt because it failed. It failed because we didn't have a project manager. Everybody was giving a lot of time on top of a full-time job. Everybody, it was stressed right off the bat, which I suppose I knew. A couple of us knew that getting into it, like, yeah, this is a new endeavor. It will be stressed right off the bat. That's what you do, but we can do it. And we did some magnificent things in that time. I mean, really magnificent things fast. And that was the entire intent, was how do I build an agency that's fast and creative, that's the powerhouse of a full agency, but has the ability to pivot like a couple of individuals just hanging out going, and so that was that pendulum. And now I look and it's like, yeah, I mean, agencies like that are all over the place, but back then that didn't exist. That was a new thing.
You said you don't really think artist and business exist outside of each other,
right?
But I'm wondering if, kind of looking back on that experience, if that perspective is perhaps one of the tripwires to the ultimate implosion of the agency, because it sounds like you had a lot of artists, but perhaps not a lot of business. And I might be making an assumption there, but
I would say we had a lot of business. We had no organization. I mean,
okay, cool.
Creative and organization can definitely have a delineation there. I mean, we were truly lacking a project manager. We were lacking. And I think that was supposed to be my role. I just never recognized it. I thought, and so like, because we were having a good time. We were doing big things real fast. And, but it's like, yeah, I still don't really, I guess maybe from an artistic lens, I don't see business or personal or art or creative or any of those being necessarily that different. But I definitely think organizing five people. I mean, you run into pitfalls left and right. I mean, even if you're just trying to get five friends together for a drink, like, God damn, that can be a real nightmare. But that doesn't necessarily equate to, a failed business. It's just like, well, we did it. We didn't have the time we wanted. But yeah.
What would you say to an artist who desires to be successful, but they think it's because of their hate for business that they can't be successful?
I have so many routes on that as well. This is my
That's okay, light it up.
My thought is, well, you're already acknowledging it, so put the work in. It's like, well, the first step is like acknowledge. Like, if you feel like you're not doing a good job because of something, well, you've recognized it. What's that line in Tommy Boy? It's like Chris Farley and Dan Aykroyd are in Elevator. He says, like, you went a little heavy on the pine tree perfume there, kid. Chris Farley says, oh, it's like an auto air freshener. He said, great, you've pinpointed it. Now step 2 is washing it off. It's like, I feel like that might be the answer. Is like, I don't know, like if you struggle with business, how many resources are there out there to learn business? How many resources that are specifically designed for creatives to learn business? Like I look at it and go like, well, way to go. You've pinpointed it. Now it's just time to wash it off, like, great, go figure it out, but that's life, I mean, if you got a million pistons, some things are higher and some things are lower, and some of them are going to break and some of them are going to, explode and take 10 with them. Who knows? That's life, but like,
go watch that YouTube video.
Yeah.
This might be a crude connection, but I think had I asked the version of you that I met, do you think you'd be a good employee? Your answer would have been, fuck no.
Fuck no.
And I don't know how you'll feel about this. I don't want to say you have a dream job, but you somehow managed to find a job that you get paid pretty well for, that somehow allows you to utilize all of these different skill sets that would have made absolutely no sense to have amassed throughout your career life experience.
Yeah.
And without kind of speaking out of school here, that job kind of found you at what I, in my, again, brief knowledge of the Scott McCormick, was like not the best time in your life.
Right.
But I think it's so cool because so often the artist thinks like, I have to be full-time, or the entrepreneur thinks this has to be my entire gig. And if I get a job, I have failed, or I am taking a step back. And so I'd like you to just kind of talk a little bit about like how the fuck you think you got like this quote unquote dream job, if that terminology isn't too triggering. And for someone who might be listening who thinks, well, I'm an artist, therefore I can't get a job, or I have a job, so I can't be an artist. I'm bad at business. I'm bad at being an employee. You can recognize these things that might not be like your favorite or what you believe as your strength, and yet still somehow create this situation that is incredibly supportive of everything you are and do.
I think on a deeper level, I still don't think I'm a very good employee. But having this opportunity has allowed me to actually step back and wonder, why do I think that? And I think a lot of it for me, you got levels of creativity, you got things you're trying to block out, you got walks that you're going on and just trying to, like everything about this brain is chaos. And when I worked for myself primarily, I was allowed to blow that chaos up on my own in whatever way I wanted. However, it also took me for a ride. I mean, it was a lot of personal hits. It was a lot of taking some of this, and like if there was a break, I couldn't relax into a break because I was so skeptical that maybe this break would just be forever. I had no notion of impermanence on my own. And so because of it, I doubled down on a break. I never just relaxed. And so I created the chaos to match what was in my head at all times. And whether or not that was me creating narratives about why people weren't getting back to emails, or why people weren't saying certain things, or, what they're like trying to control clients, try to manipulate and think about, well, if I do this, this probably matches their personality, but I should probably build in this, this fail safe because I know they're going to come back and hate this. And so, like all this manipulation, all this garbage chaos. I think taking a job, I mean, when I was originally asked, I said, no, I don't want this job. I don't want a job.
It was your buddy. Was it your buddy, Justin? Do I remember?
It was my buddy, Forrest. Yeah.
Okay.
But
another brilliant buddy.
Yeah, he's an incredible artist, really incredible artist. But like, he asked and I was like, no, I don't really want to. And now that I have a job, I mean, I took it and it was like, I struggled. Although at that time when I entered the position, it matched my chaos. It was a startup that was absolutely disastrous and just, going. And the intent and the product and everything that we were making was so pure and beautiful and wonderful and profound. And it was all there, but the chaos was, I liked it. And then it switched. We got like a new CEO and everything and now it's like business. And I'm recognizing now, like, I don't have to create that chaos anymore. Like, I'm 42 years old. I can just sit down and enjoy a cup of tea. And that doesn't mean that I have to be doing something else. And it doesn't mean that my obsessive nature has to be activated at all times. It just means I'm going to enjoy this tea. And so that's a way backed out version of your question, but like, it's not necessarily for me a delineation between having a job and not having a job, because when you're freelance, arguably you're having to take so many jobs with so many people that what not bogged me down, but I suppose what created that chaos was a constant feeling of necessity to control a situation. And now that the situation is before me, I don't get to control it. And arguably the bigger recognition is you don't get to control a damn thing. I mean, like, there is no control. ever. You're not going to control how someone's going to think about you or what they're going to do or how they're going to perceive whatever you handed them. Like, you don't get to control a damn thing. And I think in my instance, it took me getting a job to recognize, like, oh, cool. I don't think I was going about it in the wrong way. I think I was going about it in the way I knew. But I think now in hindsight, if I had to look back, I'm proud of what I created. But the one takeaway I would have is it's that chaos. And back then I was on my own, so I could create it everywhere to match, so I didn't feel like I was going insane. And I mean, I know we've all, well, I don't know all, but I know a lot of folks have struggled with the same thing, which is like, you come up with a narrative about what someone else is going to do or say or think or something, and then you approach them with that narrative being true, right? And so like, now you're at it and you're like reticent and you're kind of like, you're wanting to manipulate the conversation so it doesn't go that way. Or you may walk in and be like, you've already determined that that's what they think. And that's not communication. That's not fair. That's not anything. But like, that's work, isn't it? I mean, like, that's literally work. Is like, how's my client going to take this? How's my, how's the whatever? How are they going to handle that? Instead of just, sometimes people say like, hey, I want a nice yellow line, and you're like, I kind of want it to be green, but they're not going to like it, and at times it's just like, okay to make a yellow line and be like that. And they're, yeah, cool, done, exchange, like, I don't know. And I think like, that's more what the job is like, they're like, make a yellow line. And I'm like, how long? Like what, how thick do you want that line? Do you want it on front and back, or what do you, like, what do you, and so like, that's my chaos, instead of just like, all right.
What do you think your work is? Or I'll let you choose. When someone asks you what you do, the famous American question, how would you answer that? I don't know if it's the same. Like, what is your work? What do you do?
I like that because, right, I like both of those together, because it feels like the first one implies this, what is your work? Like, my work is me, like always my work is me, as everyone else. All of our work is us. And then the next step of work is, how do I work with you? How do you work with them? How does this all work? Like, that's our work. But how do I describe my job? Fuck.
I was going to say, you just answered both questions in 2 minutes, and I found that to be fairly profound. So cool. Good job.
All right.
Do you have a daily routine?
No.
Okay, great. Interview's over. Thank you.
All right. No, I've purposely set up ritual because I don't do well with routine.
Love that.
Yeah. So I have ceremony. I have things that I like to do throughout a day, like meditate and work out or whatever, it might be. But I've found that for me, if I build a routine, it inherently injects some form of self-shaming if I don't achieve that. Whereas if I approach it as a ritual, it's a celebration that I get to do that. And so for me, if I miss a day and I don't work out, I just miss it. I don't.
Yeah, it's just time.
Yeah.
You probably haven't slept anyway. So it's
right.
The same
Yeah. I look at it and I go like, oh man, I want to do that, Whereas routine to me says, you didn't hit that time that you were supposed to. It feels like a deadline to me. It feels like something I have to hit rather than something I get to celebrate. So, yeah.
Love this. How did you discover what ritual and ceremony? Is there a goal to the ritual and ceremony? And if so, like, how did you find this handful of elements that contribute to this particular end?
Yeah. Without divulging too much, I had a pretty massive mental break, last summer pretty intensely.
I was like yesterday and then last week.
Yeah, and then, it's right around 3:00 this morning. No.
I feel like we've both done that on the phone with each other several times in just the last month, but go on.
It was a pretty intense one. It wasn't just it wasn't mental. It was physical. I had a physical break. My body was done with me. And you know this about me, but I lost like 45 pounds, like I went way down, changed everything in my life. And, when you're met with, like I said, that pendulum is like an activating, circumstance. That was the activating circumstance, and so I've been riding it, and realizing this is different as sidebar, realizing that the pendulum doesn't necessarily ever represent good or bad or failure or success. The pendulum is just going. That's a bigger realization for me. That's not to be perceived as a failure if I don't work out. And so one of the things that massive event allowed me to do was to reevaluate foundations of what I'm setting up for myself. Mm-hmm. Because, I changed every single thing about myself. And those foundations, I thought, well, this is a wonderful time to recognize the creativity that I carry, and a wonderful time for me to assess self and look at what has worked for me in the past and build my foundations off of that. Because what I didn't want was like, okay, I quit drinking along with that. And what I didn't want was like, okay, you pull a plate from one foundation and it falls over and hits the drinking foundation. Like I didn't want to like, I didn't work out for 2 weeks, so now I'm going to have a whiskey. Oh, and now because I had a whiskey, I'm not going to meditate anymore. Now, I didn't want to build it on that. So each thing had its separate ceremony and its separate ritual, except for drinking. Honestly, drinking was a foundation that was just like, I don't know, I'm done. So I'm just done. Like that's not really a ceremony or anything. That's just kind of like, yep, I'm done. That's been a long while. I feel good about that. But I think my ceremony around alcohol was, I just hate it. I can hate that because it can take it. I'm allowed to hate that, and I don't hate that other people do it. I don't hate anything else about it except for I hate how I felt when I was drinking. And so I hate it. It was that easy. So yeah, it's been about a year. Which is, anyway, but point is the rest of those foundations, I was able to kind of like look at creatively and think about like, well, what's best for me? And routine certainly entered that equation as like a major question of like, is this a routine? Is this something like you wake up and you do this thing and maybe it's like a series of events kind of cascade into your routine of like, you make your coffee, you take your kid to school, you come back, you work out, or do you wake up early and then work out? And like, I don't know. And I realized like, how about when I get my yoga pad out, that triggers the entire ritual? How about when I set the intention in my head that triggers the rest of the world melting away as a ceremony? Maybe that's how I start. And that's how I started. When I set the intention to meditate and work on mindfulness, I did it very purposefully. Like if I felt grief, sit in grief, let that wash over, don't dismiss something that powerful. That'll come back to haunt, and so things like that, I sat with purpose and intention. And pretty soon that became its own ritual of, great, now I don't have to. I mean, if you're talking about analytical meditation or, focus meditation or whatever variation you like, now it's that state, and getting to that state, which could be a walk, could be a shower, could be, I wouldn't admit this maybe publicly, but could be driving, but like, that state now I can access as part of a ritual. I still do sit with my intention, and I still do sit closed-eyed, or sometimes open-eyed. I do focus on breath, but intention is what triggers that particular ceremony for me. And so one of the major things, this is nerdy, and I feel like I can kind of side rail on this, but like one of my early on findings with meditation was like, how do I enter a relaxed state? And I've done so many giant murals of cutting out thousands of people with the pen tool in Photoshop.
I remember that phase.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean like thousands. And so like hands and hair, like these little nightmare points became that was my place where I felt the most zen. Like I felt the most connected, the most like almost a feeling of enlightenment, because it was like a no-brainer. It's like you have this thing. And so now like that became a trigger for a lot of kind of intention for me, is like, just think about cutting out a hand with a pen tool. And that to me can reframe everything for me. It became a massive place to visit, and similar to like EMDR or any kind of therapeutic modality, like picturing a place like that or a thing like that, like for me, for a long time, it was playing music on one specific stage with two particular friends, and like, I didn't care about the audience. All I pictured was all three of us smiling and playing music. And it's like returning to that became a ceremonial kind of trigger for me, but like, yeah, anyway, but yeah, wildly that pen tool in Photoshop, all of a sudden I was like, really? All right, I guess I'm going to write it. And it activated focused meditation quickly for me, where it was like, yep, all right, just think about that, Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because what you've just described in terms of this ritual/routine sounds a lot like your creative process as well.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder, because I feel like you're kind of allergic to this term spirituality. And I think the pendulum swung from religion perhaps, but do you consider yourself, I mean, what you're describing to me, I would qualify as magic, which I think is another word you are not a huge fan of, but like, does spirituality or faith or this greater groove in the sky, does that play into your creative process or this concept? I mean, ceremony and ritual are two words that could be kind of attributed to those domains. Do you consider yourself a spiritual person, or is your art your spiritual practice?
My
Where's your
5-year-old, yeah, my 5-year-old this morning asked, "Who is God?" Trying to describe God to a 5-year-old is really fun. It was really interesting. And I found myself describing, the trees outside and the mountains and the water and all your friends and the feelings that you get on the playground and the feelings you get when you fall down and the thoughts on how you can tie your shoe and the thoughts that you acknowledge when you Velcro them, like walking through everything. And then saying, some people call all of that is God. And some people say that there's a white guy, who has strings, who's God, not to laugh. I don't mean to laugh at that, but some variation therein. But I think that the interconnectivity of every idea, every feeling, every aesthetic, every joy, fear, anger, all of that, for me, spirituality is a wonderful and beautiful question mark to ask questions that others are uncomfortable asking brings us closer to the divine in my world, in my mind, and in my heart. And I think to continually ask, seeking seems like the most spiritual I could possibly feel. Whereas if I decide I have an answer, maybe that feels awfully religious to me.
I love that. Thank you.
Yeah.
I wanted to kind of circle back to the beginning, which might means we are coming closer to the end. you identified, once you recognize a particular challenge or struggle or potential reason for not being successful, that then gets to be the thing you get to figure out. And you started with, I just need to learn how to relax and slow down and be. So I'm curious if, by applying everything we've talked about today, if you might be any closer to seeking how you might be able to slow down or enjoy a simple cup of tea.
Yeah.
Or coffee.
Yeah. You know, what's interesting that's a backlash of the rituals I've found myself in was they almost have not, mindfulness is a thing on its own. Mindfulness arguably is everything, right? So we'll put that on its own. But everything else that I've created almost has little to no connection to what I do once I open my eyes after meditating. Like working out has little to no grasp. And so my seeking now is interesting because I can put myself in a state of complete acknowledgement, you know, moment by moment of appreciation and, you know, yeah. But then once I'm done, now I'm on to the next thing. And so I suppose it's similar to enlightenment, right? Like enlightenment isn't like something you achieve, you know. Enlightenment is a moment, you know, is a moment where you found yourself being mindful, being present, being whole, and you find ways that you can get there, and you can get there a little faster, and you can get there a little longer. And so you just keep paying attention to those moments. And for me, that moment has always been work. For me, like I have this ring that tells me like when I'm stressed out or relaxed. I'm stressed out when I'm not working. And I go to like absolute restorative when I'm in front of a computer or in front of something building or making music. When I'm working, I am completely like restored. It's all that in between that is really difficult for me. And so I think there's nothing finer in the world right now than recognizing what I get to seek, because that seems like a pretty clear path, you know? That seems pretty open right now of, wow, what a delineation. Maybe it doesn't have to be this or this. Maybe it's
the both. The both and. I love that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we've covered wildly. I did not think this was going to be possible. We've kind of covered all of the questions, you know, and I think this is the time in the podcast where people typically go, well, where can people find you? I don't even know if you want people to find you.
I don't know if there's anywhere left to find me. I escaped from the advertisements of, you know.
I feel like you do have a show coming, like a gallery thing coming up? Weren't you gonna? Or
Oh,
did that
I did that
happen?
a little while ago.
Oh, okay, cool.
That was like a cowboy thing. That was fun.
Okay. Well, I'm excited for the world to get to see the culmination of the obsessive, the artist, the technician, the multifaceted creator. So thank you, Scott. Thank you so much for taking the time. It sounds like I might have caught you in a somewhat chaotic day. So I appreciate you making this happen.
Yeah,
and obviously, I love you. I look forward to the next time we get to connect.
Yeah.
And thank you for being you.
Yeah, I love you too. Thank you so much. It's good to see you again.
Well, yeah, it's fun. We always just talk on the phone, huh? We're that generation that just pick up phones and talk.
I know. I was so bad at texting. I never text. I'm like,
my younger friends are like, why would you not FaceTime me? And I'm like, why would I? I think it's the question. But
what are you talking about? It's a 4-minute phone call. Just come on. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, because I'm driving and you would just be looking at my nose. And they're like, I don't know. I can't focus. It's like, okay. Okay, kids. Okay. We're gonna bye.
Bye.